Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. We all have stuff going on. We all go through challenges in life. Sometimes life is a little more challenging than the day before or the weeks before. How do you power through within these challenges? We're going to answer that scientifically, if you will, today. And he is somebody that has dedicated his life to science, has had many eureka moments. He's done lectures, he's taught, he's done many studies and deep writings on this topic and many others. Got a great memoir as well. And he is back with us. Grant Venerable joins us on the program. Hey, Grant, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, remarkably, since I'm in the middle of moving with boxes all over the garage waiting to be picked up by a truck tomorrow. And that has me in a whole new reality I haven't been in for over a quarter of a century. But I probably moved about 10 or 12 times in my life and actually bought and sold almost as many homes. So I'm giving up this home of the last 26 years and headed for new adventures in Southern California, which is where I originate from many decades ago. So I got a surprise email from a friend who's also a chemist who's had a very successful career in industry. His name is Charles. And Charles sent me an article from the Apple News Channel about the Supreme Court decision of 1954, which is arguably the most important decision ever handed down by the Supreme Court that banned racial segregation in education, the nation's schools, and just about everything. And that started us on a lot of changes for the better, and some unintended changes. And we're still dealing with that. It's like the issue of the day. And it's become a hot political issue to win or lose elections over what that Supreme Court decision led to. Thurgood Marshall was the legal counsel of the NAACP who argued that decision before the Supreme Court. It was architected by Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the director. No, he was the dean of the Howard University Law School back in the 1940s. Well, that brought in family connections with my family as we were a very involved, very active family and on behalf of the nation's well-being and the well-being of all groups in the nation, including those who have gotten less resources than they should have, and those who have gotten maybe more resources than they should have. So now the hype that's coming across the media was what this article was about that Charles sent me, namely that there are skeptics about this decision. Well, that opens up a whole bunch of cans of worms because, as usual, it's really hype. It's really media hype. What is hype? Well, it has several origins. For me, it's mathematical. It's the word hyperbola, which is a curve on a graph that is a geometrical consideration. And it's how a plane crosses two cones, and you get this kind of nice symmetric image of two curves on the graphs that are like moving out from one another. They're moving in different directions from one another. Very artistically appealing. So that's a hyperbola. But we get the word hyperbole from that hyperbola. But another origin of hype is hypochondria, which comes from the Greek of exaggerating reality. But mostly that appears when people are complaining about their health, and we call it hypochondria. And we all have friends that are some are more talented than others on being hypochondriacs. Well, it could be said that the people of the United States, and probably the people of the whole globe, have been set up by both conscious intent and by just what's happened to technology. Technology has given more ways for people to express their views. So the news media is different than it was 70 years ago. So when we had Walter Cronkite, we had many fine, Hunter Brinkley, many fine commentators. They were far more objective. And then there was less push from their management. Although there was management, it was more open and demanding of an objectivity that we have to question now. And we have to question using the scientific method, which is a line of questioning that gets you closer and closer to reality and away from emotional expressionizing, if I could put it like that. So here's this new emotional view about, well, what good was that decision anyway? So many of the very people in the same tribal group that it was given on behalf of, some of the descendants of people from the 1950s who weren't around then, who didn't really understand its implications then, are now saying, well, what good is it? Well, the good of anything is in one's own private, personal belief and expression of confidence in principles that were being handed to talk about, to debate. And so everything is kind of scrambled up now. So Charles called me, and he sent me the email, and then I called him back. I didn't have much time to talk, but we both got down to the fact that we both belong to a tribal group. I'm using that terminology more instead of the word race. Unless you're talking about the human race, race doesn't mean a DAMN thing. It's whatever people take it to be. And it has just got everything all scrambled up. This DEI controversy, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, we had that back in the 1940s, the 1950s. But a different era came by the 1960s. It was called liberal, but it's just the way it was. Um, I think I want to get at what hype is about. Hype is about how people define reality. And reality is not as people really assume. I had to do some studying and course taking on what do we mean by reality. True reality is an agreement reached by the greatest number of people with what we believe to be true. And that's called reality. And if your belief is outside of what we, the people or tribal group, hold to be true, things get kind of mixed up. And that's where all of the shouting and the arguing comes in. So when I saw this article about the SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States decision from the 50s, it caused us to ask each other about our lives. Our lives probably have gone as well as anyone can reasonably expect. Now, did we get as wealthy as the billionaires? But are the billionaires as satisfied with their lives personally as we are with our lives? We lived imperfect lives as chemists, he in industry, and I in the academic world, where chemistry gave me a knowledge of the world that people who don't study chemistry do not have. It's difficult for them to have. So it's more than just studying the properties of chemicals, chemicals in the environment, chemicals in the atmosphere and in the ocean. It's more than that. But our chemistry has taught us a discipline of thinking and reasoning. And that reasoning teaches us to deal with our individual and family realities in a way that others cannot do. By cannot do, I mean they become victims to whatever they believe as far as the hype goes. So here's this new version of hype. There's a new version every week. So this week, the hype is, did that desegregation decision based upon race do any good? Well, it did, but it didn't do a lot of the intended good because the schools are still pretty much segregated by what we call race. But the thing is now that nobody really knows what race is. And that's the big joke when whoever the president is, and says you can't make decisions based on hiring or admitting to college based upon race. But nothing is ever defined about what race is. So when I, as your president or your governor, tell you, you cannot use race, the practical question that a scientist has to deal with, well, how do we define race? And how do you know the people that you're dealing with who are applying for something are of a particular race and that you're using that to make a decision? And I defy anyone in this planet to tell me what race is, unless they are speaking only of human beings that have an agreement as to what the properties of a human being are. That we can all reach an agreement about. And as I look at our images on the screen, we have certain common properties. We have heads sitting on our shoulders, our faces and our heads. We have arms, we have hands. We have skin. We have skin of different colorations. We have hair. We have hair of different kinds and types. But people cannot come to a decision that's consistent and logical about what race is. So when I talk to the TV and all these news items are coming around, well, you can't use race in choosing who comes to the university. I sit up there and I say to the TV, well, what the heck is race? Tell us what it is so we'll know if we're considering it or not. I defy anyone to tell me that it has a definition internally consistent over all time, and they can't do it. The courts can't do it. Why? The courts are not experts on what race is. Courts can wisely to avoid topics in which they have no professional, intellectual expertise. And now we're getting more and more edicts from the top. Say the White House, that say, well, you have to do this, you have to eliminate that. But there's never any explique as to what these edicts are talking about. What are their definitions? And here, also on the other side, you also see the universities are caving in to this ridiculousness when they're told, well, you can't use DEI or we're going to take away all of your federal funds that you get through federal grants. And by caving in, I mean, I don't see a generation of presidents. And I think I said this last time. You don't see a generation of educational leaders that stand up and say, Mr. Executive of the government, you have no call to get into our business because by tradition, our business is not ordained by government except in chartering the schools, the school districts, the colleges, and the universities. And we have accrediting agencies that make sure that we keep our noses clean and that we're adhering to all requirements that we have to have. And there's only 4. And this comes from a Supreme Court decision that nobody's talking about because they've forgotten it. And the Supreme Court is not even telling people. They made a decision in 1957 of what academic freedom means. Steve, you know that term, you've heard it. It's bandied around as common, but no one legally knows what it is. And the Supreme Court has told us it has 4 components. Academic freedom is actually 4 distinctive freedoms. The first is the college has the right to teach what subjects it chooses to teach. It also has the right to pick human beings, professionally trained human beings, to come and teach the subjects that we choose. They also have the right to choose how they teach the subjects. And fourthly, they have the right to choose whom those people are that are called to study. It's very simple, but it has been complicated by the law of entropy, which is another little chemical principle that says if you human beings complicate all of your rules, it will just get more complicated until your system can no longer handle all the complications and it collapses. We're in the early stages of collapse. I'll just put it that simply. It can be fixed, but nobody's listening for a fix. And the universities should be leading the way instead of kowtowing to clueless leaders in the government that don't know a thing. Well, that's being extreme, but they act like they don't really understand the structure of wholeness, the structure of a universe, the structure of a society of human beings. So, what comes up for you, Stephen Harper?
The word race, to me, after you've given us a view in many different ways, just seems like that word is still floating around because we're used to that word. We're just used to using it.
What does the darn word mean?
I agree. It's almost
That's
like one of those you learned that word as a kid, and then it's always been around. And when you say that word, it conjures up a picture in our minds, and we think it's accurate, but we're just saying a word and connecting something. Doesn't mean it's accurate.
right.
Hmm. And I like your
It really,
analogies to hype.
look, I grew up with the word is minority.
Oh, yeah.
And my
Okay.
parents taught me what a minority was. It's different from a majority person. The majority people operate and run the society. The minority people go by what the majority people say in operating the society. And it says, okay, you're a minority. The Constitution says the majority of the vote determines the outcome of a policy. But the minority have rights of survival and being treated in an equitable way. That's been our argument ever since the Revolutionary War that brought about this American Democratic Republic.
Mm.
Now, let's get back to when people understood or knew they understood what they meant by race. That goes back to our ancestors, Stephen, who came to this nation from places in different continents. Didn't matter how they came, but they came. They came from Asia. They came from Africa. They came from South America, Central America. They came from Canada. They came from Europe. But do you know, in Europe, the tradition was if you're of Irish heritage, you're an Irish citizen, you're of the Irish race. If you're from Germany, you're of the German race. People actually understood it. And things, I think, worked fairly well until we complicated the picture with something called skin color.
Mm.
That didn't happen until people showed up when they were brought here in chains on ships. And we had to try to fit them into society. And then people of all kinds of colors started showing up in the United States, which was a beautiful thing. Germany was one of the least colorful places in the world until just the last 30 years, when we had more intergroup international mixing. Well, what race really is in a scientific sense is your gene structure, your chromosomal structure. And because nobody can, they're looking at you, I'm looking at Stephen Harper, but I'm not seeing his chromosomal structure. Because if I did see a computer readout, I wouldn't know a darn thing about what it means.
Well, to your point, I did a DNA test, ancestry.com, last year, and found out that I'm Lithuanian. I had no idea. Much more than I thought. In fact, I thought I was more Irish than I am, and
Well,
Lithuanian. I had no idea that, disconnected from my father's side of the family, and that's what came up. So to your point, it's
those are chromosomes. That's chromosomal information
right.
that has phenotypic implications when we actually can see and hear somebody. And I learned a new term for my brother, sister, and me, because when we were born, we fit the definition of a bunch of kids who are referred to in many places as being Irish triplets. We're three brothers and sisters who were born within a period of 30 months.
Hmm.
In Ireland, that's just a cultural terminology that's used. Oh, they're Irish triplets. Even if there's four of them or five of
Right.
them,
Right.
they're Irish triplets. And it is kind of racial in the old systems of the rest of the world.
Wow.
So I'm saying that to really introduce further conversations that I think we can address rationally instead of emotionally and ignorantly
Yes.
as it's been conducted. Because we can't eliminate DEI programs. That's the right of the university from the way they were founded back in Europe and Egypt and the Middle East and in Asia. That's always been a concern, is to take the diversity of people in your nation, use the resources of a diverse group, which you wouldn't have from a homogeneous group, and you include them and you give them an equity in the society. That's part of education. It's like taking out the soul of a human being, or say the heart of a human being. Like, let's have a government action, a legislation that says nobody's allowed to have hearts or souls.
A lot, a
Well, I
lot to
think,
process. We're just about out of time, but interesting thoughts here, with the word race. And I love your connection to the word hype. I didn't know where you were going to go with that, but hype is prevalent in many areas. As you said, hypochondriac and so forth. I want to remind everybody you have a great memoir that has equally wonderful insight, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown, and you can find that on Amazon. And great talk today, Grant. And by the way, good luck with your move. I know that's coming up very soon, within a day or so.
yeah, I'll drive out of Georgia in a few days. Not sure exactly when, but it's a complex process. So
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'm taking my own advice here, how to get through it.
yep. Well, I wish you all the best with that. Maybe next time we talk, it'll be live and direct from California.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, Grant. We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.